What does it take to build a brand that stands out in a crowded market? Today, I'm joined by branding expert Vardeep Edwards to discuss branding. We'll cover the importance of understanding and developing your brand and look at how you can build a real connection with people in this episode of Architecture Business Club, a weekly podcast for solo and small firm architecture practice owners just like you who want to build a profitable, future-proof architecture business that fits around their life. I'm John Clayton, your host. If you're a small practice leader or sole practitioner in architecture, struggling to find clarity or reach your goals, consider working with me. I offer personalised, one-to-one support through coaching, consulting and mentoring. This tailored approach helps you navigate your unique path to success. Whether it's growing your practice, working fewer hours or building your team, I've got you covered. Just click the link in the show notes to book a call with me to discuss your options or email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com for more information. Now let's discuss branding. Vardeep Edwards is the founder of The Branding Fox, a brand development and design studio dedicated to your brand transformation. She has over 20 years of experience and has worked with the likes of ODEON, Curie, Pentagram and EMAP, helping growing businesses with their branding and design needs. Vardeep believes that creating a brand foundation is crucial for your business to grow. She can help you translate this concept into an impactful and purposeful brand identity so that you have clarity on your brand, your positioning, and how to attract your dream clients. To start your brand transformation, head over to thebrandingfox.com to download your free copy of 5 things every great brand needs. Vardeep, welcome to Architecture Business Club.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you for the intro. And thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Vardeep, I was trying to have a little think before we hit record, thinking back to how we first met. Can you remember where we first met?
Am I right in thinking it was a Janet Murray related event or membership, maybe, I think?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure there was an event that Janet did, a conference, which I think was in Northampton.
Yes.
I think,
yeah.
And I'm almost certain that we met in person for the first time at that event. And I guess we might have possibly connected online before that.
Yeah, I mean, that was pre-COVID, I think, that event.
Mm.
And obviously things changed in terms of events and networking for a little while. But I think that was possibly where we first met. And I think and like you say, we have met since at a couple of other events, and one just earlier this year, which is Atomicon, I believe. And I believe it was online first, potentially, and then, meeting on the networking events.
Yeah, I love in-person events. It's such a good way to meet people. And online is cool, but I like meeting people in person, I think is really special. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about branding. So we're going to talk about branding so that architecture practice owners can communicate their brand with more confidence. Mm-hmm. So why do we need a brand anyway, Vardeep? Why do you think we need a brand?
So there's lots of definitions about what a brand is out there, and some of those are based around the reputation of a business, how they're perceived, the meaning behind who they are as a brand, and the experience they're creating. And if we're looking at some of those definitions and what that means as a brand, then we've all got one, because people will be making judgments about who we are as a brand. They will be part of our experience in some respect. We would have some sort of reputation and meaning behind what we're doing. Everybody has got a brand. So it's a case of being able to shape and slightly influence that brand to be what you want it to be. But also it's about that loyalty to brands as well, and why some people might buy from certain brands over other choices as well. And some of those decisions are not entirely logical, and they might be more tied to emotional response or subconscious. So there's a famous quote, and I think it's like 95% of people buy with their subconscious brain And then it's backed up with the conscious brain and the logical side of things. When you're thinking about buying certain brands, we can use Apple, for example. There's a divide of those people who will only ever buy from Apple, regardless of what other features and benefits and tech specs there might be of similar other products from their competitors, who on paper might actually look better than the Apple option, but they will still buy from Apple. And when you start digging into why that is, it comes down to their branding, because it's almost that they can almost say what they want to say or not say what they want to say. Their decisions aren't going to be affected by that. So I just believe that branding and that connection with brands works on a deeper level, and it's not always something we're consciously aware of.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think particularly when you think of brands like, Apple, it's a great example, isn't it? That in some instances, these brands have almost like cult-like followings. Like there's so much loyalty to those brands, and it's quite astounding in some instances. So when it comes to our own brands, though, how can we define our brand identity?
I suppose this comes with clarifying some of the definitions, just to sort of make sure that we're on the same page, because I think sometimes branding kind of gets coupled with the logo, for example. I know a lot of people know the brand isn't a logo these days, but quite often when people say, I need some help with my branding, it tends to be visual related. So one of the analogies that I quite like to use is to think of your house, because there's terms like branding, brand identity, and even brand strategy as well. So in terms of like your strategy, I would sort of liken that to your foundations. It's kind of what holds everything up, and it's the stuff underneath that you won't always necessarily see or be obvious enough anyway. And then in terms of like the visual side of things, it's kind of how you style your home. So it'll be the colours, the furniture you put in there, the textures, the wallpapers, the carpets, how you lay everything out. It's things that you can see. I call that brand identity generally, but it is essentially your visual identity. But you've also got then the feeling of how you are in that home, and you can create that atmosphere or what that vibe, what that feeling might be. And that kind of comes down to then the building blocks of your brand. And when enough people come to the same or similar conclusions of how they feel, then you're said to have a brand, because enough people are saying the same thing. So I suppose defining those elements of what that is. But you've also got things like your tone and your tone of voice, your messaging, and your sort of key identifiers. And that kind of starts scaping into what makes you different, how you kind of speak. And it's to do with all the different elements of your brand that kind of make up everything, if that makes sense. Because you could have the same objects in a different house, but there's so many different aspects to building a brand that it's trying to sort of make sense of it and how it makes sense together. And I kind of liken it to building a home, which is probably quite relevant to the architecture-based podcast of yours.
Absolutely. No, I love a house building analogy. I think you've explained that really well. That's a really, really good way to explain everything. I think one of the key things that I understand about this is that, knowing your audience and understanding them is critical, isn't it, when it comes to sort of developing and refining your brand. So how can we better understand our audience and learn where they hang out and what makes them tick? What would you suggest? Yeah,
absolutely. You need to know your audience and who you're talking to, because essentially they're going to be building the brand for you. And therefore, absolutely knowing who they are and why they're going to connect with your brand is really key, and also not connect with your brand. In terms of finding out how best to understand them, it's research and talking to people, I believe. And, you might not have all the answers straight off, or you might not have all the answers all the time, and your audience may evolve and adapt and tweak along the way as well. So I do believe this is always something that needs to be worked on and involved and adapted and improved as you go. That's the nature of building a business. Yeah, everything adapts and evolves, doesn't it, as you go? But yeah, in terms of understanding them better I think talking to people is one of the best ways, actually. And that can be done through interviews, through surveys, one-on-ones, networking, going to speak to people at events if their target audience are there. Having one-on-one interviews like this, video interviews as well, is really insightful. Surveys are also very good, but also you can do a bit of stalking and research online as well. We've got so much information at our fingertips, and especially on social media as well. And it's, digging in and really getting to understand who they are, what their pain points are, why they might need your service, where that service fits in their lives and when they might need it, how, there's lots of information. But I think some of that will also come out of being really clear on who your target audience are, because you could look at certain insights of information online, but it might not be relevant for you because they're not quite the right target audience or don't quite fit that profile. So I suppose it's getting clear on who exactly that person is first, so that you can arm yourself with the right tools to be able to do that research.
Yeah. And I think, ultimately, this is about having more conversations and just simply asking the audience, sort of just having conversations and asking curious questions to get to understand them better, whether that's via a survey or a conversation on Zoom or an in-person networking event. Yeah. So that's probably simpler than we realise. We just need to actually do more of it to better understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I rate having conversations highly. I think there's something quite nice if you've got a physical shop, for example, or some sort of physical presence. Even, I've worked in market stalls before, and it's a great way to research and speak with your potential clients, because you're actually having these conversations one-on-one, and it's just part of a normal chat, rather than feeling like you're questioning or surveying them, which can tend to put people in a different position in terms of giving some of those answers.
Yeah, we don't want it to be like the Spanish Inquisition. If we can keep it quite friendly and conversational, then you're going to likely to get more from people, I think.
Absolutely.
So something I wanted to ask actually was about bringing more of our personality across, because I think that's something that people really connect with. We actually did a episode recently about personal branding, and this kind of interlinks nicely actually with this conversation. How can we bring more of our personalities into our content?
Yeah, so interestingly, personal branding, but then you've also got the personality of your brands, which can be slightly different for one another. Because if you think about some of the big personal brands, there's Richard Branson's quite a good example. Oprah Winfrey is also a very good example, where they've got an incredibly strong, famous and well-known and influential personal brands in themselves, but they've also got a portfolio of brands which is tied to their personal brand, but they are slightly different. We will go on Virgin and we'll go on some of Oprah Winfrey's products and know that it's not completely about that particular person. It's about the business of that brand. So in terms of bringing your personality, so how to bring that into your content, people are going to connect and vibe with people. So there is the validity in bringing your personality into that content. People want to know who that person is behind that brand. So it's about showcasing. It is about showcasing what you're comfortable with, I think. It's not a case of showing everything that you are about. And it's also about a bit of strategy in terms of what you would like to be known for, what you would like people to say about you, and bringing that into your content in some way, because also that's going to help differentiate you and bring out your uniqueness, and it will start to connect a bit more emotionally because people have something that they might relate to or understand from their own personal experience. But in terms of the branding of businesses, the personal brands, for those, for the well-known personal brands, it does help to boost their own business brands as well. But the business brands have their own personality. So that may or may not be tied with your personal brand. It depends on what that is. But that kind of needs a bit of shape and defining and bringing that into your content. So MailChimp is a really good example of this, I think. So they don't really have a personal brand tied. There's not one particular influencer or person tied to their brand. But MailChimp themselves have got a really strong brand personality. They're quite fun, they're creative, they're quirky, and you can see that in their messaging, their voice, their content, the way their visuals look. So, there's quite a few different ways of... sorry, I haven't quite completely sort of answered your question with like a very straight black and white response.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's sort of opening up the conversation about it. I guess what would be interesting, though, is like if you are, for example, if you're working with one of your clients and it's a small company and they're looking at refreshing their brands, how much does in terms of kind of trying to redefine that brand, how much of an impact does, if, for example, they did have somebody in that business, maybe the founder who was either a big personality or had been doing some work to be more visible and maybe has a personal brand of some kind already, does that have an influence on the development of the company brand, so that even though they're potentially still going to have differences, that there is still some synergy between the two? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that people are generally nosy, so they want to know who's behind that business. So the more you can share a bit of who you are and what you're like on a personal basis, I think is a really good way. And it's about connection and it's about being remembered as well. People will remember the personal brands over the business brands generally. And also they tend to be bigger than the business brands if they're founder-led in that respect. So absolutely it can enhance the perception of that business and the branding of that business. But also the employees then have a say and a part in that as well, because they can also have their own personal brands, which helps to reinforce that business. And there's a culture and there's like a bit behind the scenes and there's a whole, it starts leaning into the story around what that brand is, but it's also their own personal stories. And I think that's where we're connecting, is on the story level in terms of using your personal brand in that way.
In essence, then, like a really great company brands there would be some synergy and alignment between the company culture and the mission that the company's on, and even as you say about the personal brands, if there's people that are building that personal brand within that business, that there's some alignment there too, because it could otherwise be what would be the word? Incongruent. I think that's the word, isn't it? Let's say you had like a really like corporate sort of professional type brand, company brand, and then you had a really kind of quirky kind of fun, informal, little bit cheeky sort of founder and that was really visible, or vice versa. There could be this sort of disconnect between the two that might be a bit strange. So and as you say, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but there would be some kind of connection and synergy ideally between those things.
Yeah, and I think you raised the point about values is a really important point, because I think, when quite often, and there's been some stats around that be rising in terms of people wanting to work for companies who have shared values with their own as well. And that can be a driving force as well for recruitment for certain businesses as well. And also with staff retainment and staff retention as well. Because if you've got an alignment with your personal values as well as the company values and their mission, and you believe in their mission and their vision, there's a really nice synergy, like you've put it, in terms of being a good fit. So therefore, when they are communicating in a personal brand level, it's very much connected to what they're doing on a business level as well. And that, that creates a nice harmony, as it were, in our brains when we're kind of receiving content from both of those sources.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want you to talk a little bit about content creation. When we talk about content, things like could be videos, blogs, social media posts, short form content, podcasts, all those sorts of things. That can be a good way to help build some visibility for your brand. I just wondered if you had any content ideas for any business owners out there that might be a little bit unsure where to start, and maybe they are struggling for some ideas or don't know what to say in their content. Do you have any suggestions for them? Remember, don't forget to download the Architecture Business Blueprint, the step-by-step formula to freedom for architects, architectural technologists and architectural designers. You can grab the blueprint without any charge at architecturebusinessclub.com/blueprint. And if you're enjoying this episode, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two different types of content. I would say it's a short form and long form content. So long form, like these podcasts, for example, or blogs or videos. Short form are perhaps more like social media snippets and bits and pieces of information. And I think one of the key things to remember about creating content is nobody will see all your content. And also the way we consume content is different now to even, 5-10 years ago. So we would get snippets and bite sizes of different pieces of information about you. It might be, it might be a social media post, it might be a story, it might be a video, it might be commenting on somebody else's. You might be doing a guest podcast, or you might be hosting a webinar or a workshop or an event. You might be out networking, you might be blogging. There's all sorts of different ways of creating and for your audience to receive that content as well. And I think from my own experience and what I, speaking to other people, what they get stuck on not knowing how to create or where to start with their content is it can feel quite overwhelming because it feels like there's loads you've got to do, or suddenly you've got to write a blog every day or something silly like that. But I think in this day and age, we can't get away from not creating any content. I think it's expected of us as business owners and as brands. And if you're not being visible as much or not creating consistent or relevant or even more up-to-date content, fortunately, what that means is that we don't necessarily show up in front of other people, especially online, I believe. So in terms of knowing what to say or what to post, I find the easiest thing to start off with is things you're working on or what you're doing. It's not a case of having to go out and do research on a load of articles and trying to put that into some sort of long form content initially anyway. I believe some of the easiest way to start is to do something quicker and easier so you get into the habit and the pattern of creating that content in the first place. And then I think it's approaching it with curiosity, because I think sometimes in terms of long form content, and again, it's using my own experience on what I've come across, it might feel like suddenly you've got to have all the answers to this big long topic. And I don't believe that's ever the case, because you could do all the research and write a really wonderful piece or an article about something, but maybe next week it will change. Who knows? So I think it's more about approaching it with a bit of curiosity and opening up that conversation. So rather than being, I've got to have all this wonderful content and it's got to be perfect, it's more about, I wonder what this is about, and in terms of the short form and what you're working on, just it allows people to a little bit of insight into who you are, what you're doing, how you help your clients. And, that's really valuable, actually. And I think maybe we overlook that sometimes as business owners because it's just something we do on a day-to-day basis. But,
I think that's a really good idea, Vardeep, because behind the scenes content is a great way to build that know, like and trust that people can get. And what we do in our day-to-day work that we might think is not particularly interesting maybe, that other people would be fascinated by it. So to be able to give them a few little snippets, whether it's just a quick photo of what you're working on, or in the case of architects, it might be a snapshot of drawings that are in progress, or it could be them at their desk. Could be a quick reel, short video if you're feeling brave enough that you post on Instagram stories. But that is a good way that you can create content without having to spend really any time planning it, and it's actually being created while you're doing something that you're already going to be doing anyway, because you're already planned to do whatever work you had that day, and you're just sharing a few little snippets from it to just give people a look behind the curtain so that they can see what's going on. So I think that, it's a really good idea, Vardeep. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that's helpful.
Yeah, so how do you think we can create an emotional connection with our audience? We sort of touched upon that a little bit there, actually, I think, with the behind-the-scenes stuff. But do you have any other thoughts on that, about creating that emotional connection?
So I think it's about building relationships. And I say that because I believe that's what businesses are built on generally. And, and it's approaching that in the same way in connecting with your audience. So rather than thinking about how to sell to people or, selling your own products or services, it's about building relationships, because then you're thinking about that connection piece rather than trying to sell to them. And, I liken it a bit to dating, because if you're dating, or if you're meeting, if it's not dating and you're networking and you're meeting people for the first time, you're not going to jump in there and going, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. And by the way, I've got this amazing offer that I think, you will love." And, and I don't know about you, but I do get quite a few of those messages on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And all I want to do is delete. That's not going to work in real life as much as it doesn't work online either. So it's about building up to that know, like, and trust factor. People aren't going to know, like, and trust you from the first instance, the second, the third, fourth, fifth. I think there is some sort of stat, isn't there, now? It used to be something like 7 or 8 touch points, but I believe it's actually higher now. And I think that's to do with the way we consume information and the fact that there is so much information out there. So therefore, what that means is that relationship building piece with your audience is potentially going to take longer, because one, it's fighting against lots of other information in their lives. You kind of cut through more noise, so they may not even get your content or piece of information or understand it in the first few instances. And it just takes time to build those sort of relationships. But it's also, again, it is knowing your audience, and if you're doing the research piece alongside building those relationships, that can only strengthen and improve over time.
That's so true. The statistic that I'd heard, I think it was from a study done with Google. There was an ebook, 0 Moments of Truth,
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And that talked about before general consumer in today's age is ready to buy a product or service, that there are typically 11 touch points in 7 hours of engagement, and across 4 different places.
Okay.
I mean, that's a heck of a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah, and it takes time, And the interesting thing is that we are, I believe, I think, part of a binge culture. I don't know about you, but I'm so used to having things at my fingertips that when I watch a show on TV, I want to watch the whole series. And I think, so there is some validity in that, and what you've said about it's the 4, 7, 11, isn't it, or something? I think I've come across that before. So if they are able to consume your content and almost binge it in a weekend, suddenly your trust factor has potentially gone up. So that's quite an interesting way to look at it as well, in terms of building that connection.
Yeah, I think particularly for a really small business or sole practitioner, and generally most small business owners are very time poor.
Yeah.
Essentially, your content can do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of building that know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And so people are trusting your brand more and getting to that point where they're more likely to become a client, a customer, by using that content to do some of that for you. So you're not having to do that individually with every potential prospect every time. Vardeep, how can we raise our brand's visibility? Do you have any other thoughts and ideas on that? We've talked a number of ideas already that I think can help do that, but was there anything else we might have overlooked?
So one of the things I would say is to get clarity before you look at how best to be visible, because if you've done some work on your brand, you know what you're about, you know what you want to communicate, you know why you're different from your competitors, you know why people should choose you and not your competition, and what value that is going to be, then what that does, that clarity helps to cut through some of that noise. So, and I know there's lots of tips and tricks that you can Google or search or even use some sort of AI tool in terms of how best to be more visible. But I think you've got to know why you exist and why people should buy from you first and foremost, because that will help underpin your messaging and what you communicate about yourself. And also it gives you confidence in your brand because you know that's the right message for you and that comes across. Because if you're not sure or you can't answer some of the questions as to why you're different, what that does sometimes is make some of your messaging or your brand a little bit muddled or confused. And if you're a bit confused, there's no doubt that your end user will be confused. So getting that clarity is one of the first steps, I believe, to understanding how to raise your own visibility. It is then looking at who your audience is, because it's about being visible to the right people. And it's really looking at then who they are, where they will be, where they hang out, how best to get in front of them, what sort of partnerships are potentially going to be useful for you. And you won't know that until you know what you're about and you're really clear on who your audience is as well. Then to understand what the best way is to be visible. And, because then you can understand where you fit in their lives. It might be podcast. You won't know that until you know your audience. It might be videos, it might be in-person events, but you don't know until you can answer some of those other questions first.
So those brand foundations are really important to have that kind of clarity on things. And that totally makes sense to me, that idea that we were talking about if people are a bit unsure when it comes to content and what to talk about. And if you don't have that clarity on your business and your brand, then it's going to be difficult to show up. And there is the option of the behind the scenes content, which is a great idea if you are a bit unsure. But beyond that, if you're wanting to talk about things with a bit more depth and meaning, and it to align nicely with your business, then if you don't have that clarity, you haven't got those foundations right, then that could be quite difficult for you. And you mentioned about the confusion that can cause. Yeah. Confused people don't buy. No. So if we're going to be confusing prospective customers, then they are not going to be buying from us. They will find another competitor that has much clearer messaging and they'll go and buy from them instead.
Absolutely, yeah. It's clarity wins, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So how can we sort of bring all this together, Vardeep? Because we've covered quite a lot here, but if you want to kind of bring this all together so that we have this consistent, coherent brand, do you have some recommendations there?
I kind of believe that building a brand needs to sit amongst all your other business building activities. So your business strategy, your marketing, your sales, your PR. And I think so one of the key things in terms of building that consistency and that coherence around your brand is to bring branding in as something you are working on and evolving along with other activities to grow your brand, to grow your business, So it really is thinking about it as part of your business and the system and not just an add-on or something that you've just done once and that's it. And going back to, people, it's your people who build your brand. You are able to shape and influence it to a certain extent, but essentially it's people, and it can destroy brands quite as quickly as well, because it is built by the people who use it or interact with your brand in some way. So I think in terms of the consistency is to understand that your brand is it's a living and breathing thing. So it's something that needs to be worked and tweaked on, involved and adapted as you go. And so therefore, what that means is it means putting into your metrics, you're measuring, you're analysing it, you're auditing it, you're assessing it, whether it's right for you, whether it's working for you, is it giving the right message, is it communicating what you want or need it to about your brand, is it connecting with the people you want to connect with, is it helping you grow your business? And there's a report I kind of read as a yearly report, and one of the recent ones, they highlighted that the most successful businesses who are still at the top of their game in terms of brands and being known are the ones that invested in their brands over their branding and brand marketing over any kind of tips and tactics and short-term strategies. So what that says to me is that businesses, small businesses, large businesses, even solo practitioners as well, need to be thinking about how best to involve that brand to have that consistency. Because when you're looking at that and looking at the different elements of your brand, you are then assessing whether the different elements make sense together. And if they're not, you're able to improve and work on them. So therefore, it's building that consistent brand as you grow as a business.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's try and sum things up, Vardeep. Mm-hmm. If people were just to take away one thing from this conversation, if there was just one thing that you wanted them to remember when it comes to branding, what would that be, do you think?
I would say, in terms of a one thing, it would be that working on your brand is not a one-stop exercise in terms of, okay, I've done that now, I can put that to one side. I've got the guidelines, we've got it there. It's about how to integrate that into your business and what that means for you as well going forward.
Cool. So was there anything else that you wanted to say about the topic that we haven't already covered? Was there anything that we should add in?
I would really like to just bring up the use of AI because it's quite a hot topic at the moment. And I've seen quite a few AI tools out in some of the brand building elements, whether it's your marketing plan, whether it's customer research, logo creation as well. I've seen a few. And there's even been some sort of brand building AI tools that have come out. So I think it's an interesting area to consider and bring up in any sort of discipline, really, not just branding, and how that's going to be used in how you build your business, how you grow in terms of what you're doing as well and what you're offering. Will AI replace elements of it, or how will it be used? Because I don't think this is going away. And I know there's been lots of backlash about the use of AI and some of the outputs as well. But I just think it needs to be considered and thought about as well. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that as well, John.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many AI tools that are available already, and they're coming out faster and faster every week. Mm-hmm. I think the stage that we're at the moment with AI is that I think AI currently is a useful tool. Like the software that we have available, it can aid you in producing whatever it is, if you're working on your brand or content or whatever. Or there's like architecture-specific tools as well to assist with design. It can help to do it, but I just look at it like it's just another tool in the toolbox alongside the pencil and the notepad and the CAD software or whatever else that we have. It's not quite at the stage yet where you can just sit back and press one button and it's just done everything for you. Yeah. You can put just a short prompt into something like ChatGPT and get it to write something for you, get a long piece of content written, but most of it's not really very good. Like the quality of the prompting, the more detail that you're able to provide it, the better the output.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to the quality of what you input into these tools has a direct impact on the quality of that output.
Yeah.
So if you are opening up ChatGPT and just putting a one-liner in there saying, write me some social media posts for an architect's practice so I can stick it on Instagram next week, it's going to be pretty vanilla. And once you've used those tools for a little while, you realise like I can read a piece of copy now and I'll know, like, unless they've put in a really good prompt or really good instructions around tone of voice and language and rules for the writing, it sticks out like a sore thumb if they've not prompted properly.
Yeah.
That may change though. I mean, I know that there's talk about AI agents where they can operate more autonomously, and the pace of change is really quick. I don't think it will be long before we do start to see some more sophisticated AI tools. But for now, I don't think anyone needs to worry too much, I don't think we're going to be out of a job next week, Vardeep.
No, and I think there's something to be said about creativity and also, that original thought that we have as humans and in our brains. And the other thing to just be aware of is the ethics, copyright and plagiarism behind what AI tools churn out and where it's getting that sources from as well. But I just think it's something, it's a topic in an area that I think all businesses and business owners need to look at.
Absolutely, yeah. I think maybe at the moment it's sort of looking at it like it's almost like a sort of office intern or helpful assistant that you can back and forth a few ideas with, but it's not at the stage where, for a variety of reasons, that you can rely wholly on the output from any of those AI tools without putting in quite a lot of work yourself. This has been really good, Vardeep. What I do like to do with the guests on the show is we wrap up with a non-topic question about travel, because I love to travel. I don't get as much opportunity to do it these days as I used to, but I love to travel and to discover new places.
Okay.
So I was wondering if you could tell me about one of your favourite places and what you love about it. And this could be near or far. Like, we've had everything from like the coffee shop in the local park right to like exotic places across the world. So does anywhere spring to mind?
Oh my goodness. It's a really hard question actually, John. Because there are so many places for all sorts of different reasons. And like you say, they're not always the exotic places because you've got some other sort of connection or a memory or experience from it. One of the places that does stick out for a number of reasons is so I've been to South America a couple of times, and one was for the Rio Carnival, which was amazing. But the other one was I went and did the Inca Trail and took sort of 3 weeks out and went to Peru with my now husband and friends. And there's nothing quite like it doing the Inca Trail. I still cannot, bearing in mind this was nearly 20 years ago, I haven't got anything that I've done or experienced that has quite the same impact and effect. So that's one experience I would say is etched in my brain and won't forget for a very long time.
Oh, I have travel envy now.
Do you?
Brilliant. I've been to South America. I have been to Rio, but I wasn't there when it was Carnival. But I haven't done the Inca Trail, and that was something that I would have loved to have done.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
Who knows? Maybe we might get there one day.
Bucket list. Put it on.
Yeah, it's on the bucket list. So Vardeep, thank you so much for joining me on the show and sharing your expertise today. Where's the best place for the listeners to get in contact with you online?
So I am the Brandy Fox everywhere. I'm obviously my own name, Vardeep Edwards, on LinkedIn. And it's for those two spaces, you'll be able to contact me on social or on my website.
Oh, that's awesome. And can you just remind everyone about your downloadable that we mentioned in the introduction, 5 Things Every Great Brand Needs.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell everyone about that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, there's quite a lot of different aspects in terms of building a brand, and I think it can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. But I believe there are some core things that everybody can do, regardless of their time, what stage they're at their business, and whether they're one person, small, medium, large. And so I've created this download of sort of 5 core things that I just think anybody and everybody can do and can work on and start that ball rolling in terms of working on their brands.
Oh, that's fantastic. Right. Thank you so much, Vardeep.
Oh, no at all. Thank you for having me, John.
The next episode will be our last of 2024. So I'll be taking a look back at the past year in a special festive episode. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.